Hi, I'm Colby Powell, and in this episode I'm going to go through how I created the image Fae using a model by Colby Files, which was called Fae. So basically that's how I came up with the name for the image. Let's keep it simplified. Hey, so this is the final image. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and we'll go through it step by step. So started with a blank image, and I brought in various bits and pieces to make up the background. Some of it is quite subtle, and it takes quite a few layers to build up complexity in some of the images. So this is just a image that I've got. It's got a little bit of topography on it, some old wallpaper, various other bits and pieces, and I dropped it's just on normal mode, and I dropped the opacity down to around 65%. Then I brought in this layer, which is pretty much at normal, but it is just, you can just see through it to the image below. And then I've put another image which is an overlay. It's just some text that's been burnt out, nothing particularly exciting. It just gives a slight edge to the feel, makes it feel a little bit grungy. And then I've put this energy bolt, which I've got lots and lots of different colours, and I've just put that through, dropped the opacity down to 75%. And then I put another one on the top and dropped that down to 69%. So that's pretty much the background. Then I brought my model in. As I said, this is a Colby Files image. The model's name is Fae. So I just brought it in, as I said, just using the quick selection tool. I just went through and selected the areas that I wanted of the model. Just go through and select exactly what you need, and then I created a layer mask. So if you can see, without the layer mask, you've got all the background there. So that's with the layer mask on. I then added a bit of brightness to her because she was quite dull. Also added a curve layer to bring my middle tones up. And I did another slight subtle less curve there as well, just to add to it. The hue saturation, I brought the saturation down because I didn't want it to be quite so stark. And then I did a slight colour balance as well, where I brought some of the yellows back in to tone her skin down a little bit and added a bit more warmth with some red. So that was bringing the model in. So then I brought in the wings, which is just some chicken wings actually, that I had in my collection, and I added a level adjustment to it, and I did some shadows on that as well. So if you just have a look at those on their own, it's just at multiply at 77%. It's just a brush that I put through just in really low opacity. So yeah, so that just put a bit of shadow on the wings from behind her because it just looks a bit more natural that way. And then I added a hue saturation to the wings as well, just to drop that back out again. Then I, just using some little flower petals, I created some nipple covers. So just little hydrangeas that I popped in over the top, and I put a little shadow layer behind it and all the rest of it just to drop shadow. Then I added a little piece of hair. So sorry, I'll go. If where I put the nipple cover in, it actually covers the hair up, and I wanted the hair to be back over the top, so I just copied the below layer from here, brought it back up, changed it the layer mask to completely black, and then with a soft small white brush I just painted the hair back in that particular area where I wanted it to be. So if I took the layer mask off, or show you just the layer mask, so everything else is masked out, it's just that tiny little area there that you can see. I then did her makeup, which is basically a soft brush that I had set to colour and just lightly paint in. I painted in some of the background colours, so the blues from in the background and the pinks that I had throughout, and just with a soft brush. I then did a dodge and burn layer, which is 50% grey. So basically, so if you go and add a new layer, so I just did Control Shift and N, and you set that to overlay, and then you click this here with this fill overlay with neutral colour. That gives you a grey layer that becomes, you can't see it. If I was to put it on normal, then it's just grey. You can then come through with a brush, just a standard brush, and I usually set it at about 10% opacity, and go through and highlight all my shadows and my highlights. So if you go have a look at it just on normal layer, you can see where I've deepened all the shadows, just around her arms and her face, her neck, and around her abdomen and so forth. And I've also gone and done some highlights on her face and her arms, abdomen again. Also added some highlights on the edges of her wings as well, just to give it that nice soft look and make everything sort of stand out a bit more. I brought in this little butterfly. Nothing terribly exciting about that. All I did, it was a pale pink. I wanted it blue just to stand out from the wings a bit more, so I popped that in. If you go in and have a look up close, there's some little diamantes that I've put on her eyelids, and across her chest. They're just little diamantes, gems. You can see them a bit stronger there, and every single one of them I've given a drop shadow. Then I brought in this layer, which is a beautiful blue textured finish by Jai Johnson, but I didn't want that too much over the model. I just wanted to keep it in the background. So I've gone through and added a layer mask and painted out where I didn't want it. So it's basically just on her body that I've removed most of it, but not all of it, and I've left it to apply to the wings. Then I had this texture, which is a cracked paint texture, which I put over the top, and again masked out the areas that I didn't want it because it's too much over her body. Then I flipped it, duplicated it, put it at the top, and masked out the areas that I didn't want. I then went into Nik effects and went into HDR effects and did HDR Deep 1, which then just gave it more depth and strength, brought out more of the highlights and a bit more of the contrast in the image. I then did this halo light, which I've set to soft light, but it's just a brush that I've got, which just set to white and just paints through this streaky light. I've then set it to soft light. It wasn't quite strong enough, so I duplicated it and did another copy. So it's exactly the same thing, and I've brought it through twice. I then did a white layer, which I've set to soft light, but I didn't want it, I wanted to keep it a bit darker down here, so I did a layer mask with a gradient fill to cover that up. So it just brightened it all up a little bit, especially through the top where this halo light would be. I then did a curves layer, where I adjusted the various colors. So I brought more blue into the shadows, yellow into the highlights. The greens, I brought more greens in, more magentas into the highlights, and same again with the reds. I kept the reds where they were, but I brought more cyan into the highlight. So as you can see, you can move it around. I wanted the cyans there. I then did a solid color, which is just a dark navy blue, that I put through, and I've set to lighten. Then there's a two little owls background that I've got, that I've put in over the top, and I've stretched it and warped it a little bit so that it sort of fits where I wanted it to be, and put that over the top. Now this is where the image starts getting really cool. I've got this fractal, which is actually an image, I believe, from Pixabay, but I got it in November's Shift Art Challenge to play with, and I sort of never really used it, but it just looks brilliant here. So just seeing it at 100%, it's just got all these wonderful dots and swirls, and it just seemed to be perfect for this image. So did take a little bit of playing around. I could have set it to quite a few different modes, lighten or vivid light or multiply, or it really was a playing around with it. I ended up choosing overlay in the end, but it was still a bit too bright, so I dropped it down to around about the 70% mark, and I was quite happy with the pattern and the swirls and everything that I got on that. Then I added these paint splotches, just to give it a bit more depth, a little bit more interest, draw the eye around the image a bit more. Then I added another curves layer just to darken sort of the mid-tones through to the shadows a bit. Then I merged it all. I then went into Nik effects again. This time I used analog effects, and I used a classic camera 4, which is quite subtle here, but because I've got the opacity down to 12%, but if I bring that up to 100%, you can see that it's actually quite a stark change from what I had. But if you bring that right down, it's quite a nice subtle shift that it brings to the image. I then did another layer of that, so if I turn that off, I'll show you. So if I just Control Shift Alt and E, and that creates a whole new layer. Then if you go to Filter, Other, High Pass, then that creates a shot which is just the details. Now you can dial this down or dial it up, or you can show as much or as little as you want. Sometimes you just want minute details to show through. Other times you want to dial it up a bit more, so you've got a bit more showing through. I did want to pick up a little bit of the swirls on the fractal, as well as the details on the wing and her jewels, her hair, etc. So I put that in at about 7. Now you can do two things. You can either set this to linear light, and that gives you quite a strong light as well. You can see where it picks up all the details, where it's quite soft there, and there it's quite strong. Or you can in fact go through and you can set it to overlay, you can set it to soft light. There's various bits and pieces you can do. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So that's the final image. That's where we are, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you on the next tutorial. Bye for now.